we're allowed in the building to demo it for the kids, but
Oh,
obviously that's
good,
not open, so
good.
that's
Well, we
something.
could get started. Why don't we do that?
All right, sounds good.
All
All right,
right. Yeah.
hi.
Oh, I'm going to introduce you.
Oh, sorry, go
First.
ahead.
That's all right. It's my pleasure my name is Kathy Syak, to introduce our speaker, Tressa Sharma from Woodstock High School in Illinois. Her topic is making standards-based grading work for you. Tressa has been teaching in Illinois for 7 years and has been science department chair at Woodstock High School for the last 5 years. During this time, she has taught general chem, honors chem, and AP chemistry. This fall, she'll be adding dual credit chemistry to her teaching duties. What is dual credit chemistry?
So dual credit chemistry is we have partnered with our local community college to offer college credit for the class that they take.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Oh, yes.
it's a little tricky because really it's sort of our honors chemistry class. It's not
Yes.
rigorous enough to be AP, but it's on par with honors, but there's certain math requirements that have to be met to be able to take it, and not all of
Yes.
our kids who
Yes.
take honors meet. So we have 4 levels of chemistry now.
Well, we have something similar and in Rhode Island. So, and Alana teaches one of those sections. So, Tressa, uh, we're happy to listen and to learn something new.
Great. Like Kathy said, my name is Tressa. So standards-based grading, I was a little nervous doing this, to be very honest, because I'm not a pro at it. It's something that I have been sort of working on over many years. So it might not look like the traditional standards-based grading that you may have previously seen in other training. It's just sort of kind of my own hybrid model of how to make it work in a traditional classroom. My school building and my district are still traditional at the high school level. The 0% to 100% grade level or grades. So it's a little bit different. But it works. I really enjoy it. I'm using it in all of the honors chemistry classes I teach, and I will be using it with dual credit and AP this year as well. So far I've really liked it. It's worked. If you have questions, I have the chat window up. Feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. So this is just sort of a breakdown of the different things I'm going to cover. Just, your standard, like, I guess, info slide, grading, standards-based grading, what do assessments look like, so on and so forth. So the first thing with grading is I was trying to figure out how to organize this. And I feel like as educators, we all know the traditional definition of what grading is. But grading is something that I personally have, I guess, struggled with is the best way to put it. My very first year teaching, I remember working with a friend. She's an art teacher, and obviously I'm a chemistry teacher. And I was grading a lab report, or I was grading something. It was a while ago, so I don't completely remember. And I think I took off points because like the format wasn't correct. And my friend said, well, why are you taking off those points? I said, well, they didn't format it correctly. And she's like, well, is that what you're trying to grade, the format or the concept? And that really has stuck with me pretty much my entire teaching career, because I realized that I guess in that moment I was grading for the format, but was that what I wanted to grade for? Not that that's bad. Maybe that is what I wanted to grade for, but I had not defined that for myself. And so I really started struggling with, well, if I'm not fully defining it for myself, how am I showing my students that their grades accurately reflect what they're learning in my class? So I have worked on this, really tried to find a system that I feel accurately reflects for the students what they're learning. That's definitely a struggle. I think a lot of teachers struggle with that. And so this so far has felt like the best fit. I do think this will continue to evolve, but it's really how do I make sure that when they look at their grade, they know that that's reflecting their understanding of chemistry, not just their ability to complete my homework. So what do we grade? There's quite a few different things. This is different for every single teacher in every single district and every single level. Maybe you're focusing on science skills or life skills, executive functioning skills. Maybe you do want to include behavior in that. Maybe you just want to get completion, so then that way they get points for just finishing an assignment. Maybe it's all content. In my honors class, it's mostly content based. There's a couple of skills that I do assess. Last year, I took away completion completely. So I do not actually grade their homework. Well, I didn't. This coming year, I just recently was telling Kathy that we are going fully remote up until October. And so I will actually be implementing a completion grade, simply to make sure that they are participating in the remote learning. Once we get back in the classroom, that will be gone. But the completion grade was something that I used to use because I wanted to give them points for completing it. But then as I moved towards a standards-based model, I realized that that wasn't really necessary, and I kind of got rid of it. And I'll talk about that more later. So standards-based grading, what is it? A lot of high school educators have, well, I want to make an assumption here, maybe I'm wrong, but at least in the Midwest, we hear the name Marzano thrown around a ton for standards-based grading. He has a ton of books. I know the first school I taught at, they did professional development with him. And I remember when I first learned about it, I really loved what he was trying to do, like the concept of it. But then once I started diving into the nitty gritty of how to actually do it, it became extremely overwhelming. It became just so unrealistic in the classroom that I just shied away from it and I stopped. I just gave up standards-based grading. The concept to me sounded amazing, but the implementation seemed impossible. So I just was like, okay, that's not going to work. As I started to kind of look at it again, one thing I realized is that if you Google search standards-based grading, there are a ton of resources out there, and there's many different ways of doing it. But the core thing that you see kind of through all of these different posts is that standards-based is just finding a set of standards that you have in your class and you're assessing those standards. So that's sort of where that completion grade gets lost, because now you're looking at specific standards that you want to assess. Those standards could be skill-based, they could be executive functioning. Maybe you teach a lower level class and a skill is being able to turn things in on time, or a skill is being able to use a planner. You can turn that into a standard. Or maybe it's a higher level class and you don't want to do that and you just want to focus on the chemistry concepts themselves. So I felt like Marzano, while great, it was too much. So I sort of just started defining it for myself. Again, the key thing here is standards. So one of the things I started trying to figure out was, where do I find my standards? Some of you, depending on the state you're in, maybe you have already implemented science standards. Illinois does have science standards. They're the NGSS standards, which, to be very honest, are very broad, especially with chemistry. So it does allow me to sort of create some of my own. I've used textbooks. I've used other teachers. So I've gotten onto like different online teacher communities and teachers in my district and just kind of hashed out with them. Like, they've shared their resources. So I've kind of pieced together all these different standards from different areas, and I've developed them over a couple of years, to be honest. If you're doing AP chemistry, you could use the College Board standards. I do believe they also recently came out with a pre-AP chemistry course that maybe they have standards there as well. I honestly haven't looked, but it can kind of come from anywhere. So here's an example of standards that I personally created. These are what I use in my class. I have them for every single unit. I try to keep them, I think I have a couple like really like, I'll just call them hefty units, or I might have like 12 learning, I call them learning outcomes. I might have a couple more than just like the 4 you see here. I try to keep them small. I try not to go over 10, but sometimes the unit, it's just out of my control and I have to have extras. So what I do is I created different learning outcomes or standards, or however you want to call them, learning targets. The 5 in front of it represents the unit, and then the 0.1 represents the number of the standard. So learning outcome 5.1, that's the first learning outcome in unit 5. And I reference this to my students the entire school year once they have seen this list. Every time we start a new unit, they actually get a handout with all of the learning outcomes on them. And beneath that, I've included basically what that actual standard involves. So like you can see with learning outcome 5.1, being able to represent a chemical reaction with a balanced equation. Well, this includes identifying the difference between a physical and chemical change, writing a chemical equation using proper symbols, and then actually balancing it. Some standards are pretty self-explanatory and there aren't any sub-parts to it. And some of them, they require a little more information, like you can see in 5.2, just so that way students get a more detailed understanding of what's encompassed in that. I would be more than happy to share my learning outcomes with anyone who's interested. So that way you don't have to start from scratch. Just let me know. I can send you an email and then you can modify them however you want. To be very honest, the ones I have are great, but I definitely know there's some I will be changing. Some I might be combining. Some I might be elaborating more on. So this is just something that it's kind of a living document that I just keep kind of tweaking over the years. So this is just my first draft. I use chemical reactions and stoichiometry because, to be honest, I think that's the easiest unit to demonstrate standards-based grading with. But I have done it in every single unit. This is a sample of, yeah, I would gladly share them. Honestly, that was also one of the most intimidating things about moving to standards-based grading, is trying to come up with your own standards. Chemistry standards are not nearly as easy to come by as I thought. Sometimes they're just way too broad, and sometimes they're not, sometimes they appear to be missing things. So by piecing different things together, it made it easier, but that is one of the hardest things to find. Like I said, this year I am attempting this with AP Chemistry. I have never done this before, so it'll be a learning experience. But the first thing I wanted to figure out was, okay, what do I use for my learning outcomes with the students? And I'm going to be using the enduring understanding. It lends itself very well. If I just used the learning objectives, there's too many. You'd end up with, like, I think 90 something, maybe more than that. I'm not 100% sure, but that's a lot. And that's just way too much. So I tried to figure out how can I scale that down, and using the enduring understanding made it a little bit easier. So that's what I decided to move with instead. That could change. Like I said, this is my first time doing it. But that allowed for a little more flexibility with it. And so again, I'd be more than happy to share this with anyone who's interested. But like, it's just the enduring understanding based off the new CED. So assessments, I feel like I'm going really fast. So if you have a question or you need me to slow down, let me know. Going over how to actually put this into a grade book, I think, is what takes most of the time, because if you don't have a standards-based grading system, you have to kind of piece it together. So assessments. So in reality, that's up to you. How do you assess? So I personally have moved away from end of unit tests. I used to do that, like I think most teachers do. And I decided that rather doing end of unit tests, I do weekly quizzes. And those weekly quizzes are aligned to the learning outcomes. This last year when I did it with honors, it worked really, really great. A lot of the students said they appreciated it because it felt less overwhelming. The other thing I really liked about that is when I did end of unit tests, and let's say a student didn't do well, I would have to try and figure out where in that unit they didn't do well. Because most of the time it's not the whole unit. Most of the time it's just an area of the unit that they struggled with. And using the learning outcomes to drive those assessments is now helping me zero in on specific things that students struggle with. So like with the unit 5, oh, you can't balance an equation. That's why you can't do stoichiometry. Or I can say, oh, you can do stoichiometry, but you're getting the wrong answer because you're consistently balancing your equation wrong. So it's allowing me to see those specific things, and I'll talk about reassessment at the end, but then if I choose to reassess, or if they choose to reassess, they're not doing the entire unit test. They're focusing on just that one area that they struggled with, which is really nice. It's less overwhelming, honestly. I did use unit tests with AP Chemistry. This year, I'm going to be shying away from that and using quizzes as well with them. The one thing I am introducing to all the classes, though, which I have not done before, is a midterm. I do think it's worthwhile giving them kind of like one of those meatier tests that covers a lot more material all at once. So I will be including a midterm. My midterm, however, will not be a standards-based assessment in the format that you're going to see in just a minute. So this is where I say it's a hybrid, because some of the stuff I do is just your traditional multiple choice question, right or wrong, and then your percentage is your grade. Because one of the things I hold personally as a philosophy is that if you don't want to make your whole classroom standards based, I don't think you should have to. Labs are extremely challenging to make standards based. They really are. I have not accomplished that yet. That is something I would like to work on. With everything that's happening in the world, that has been put on the back burner. And right now my goal is to just try to survive this year, to be very honest. So I will hopefully at some point be able to do that. But as of right now, my labs are just traditional labs that I grade in a traditional manner, because I just haven't figured out a way that I feel accurately represents standards based and really works in my class. But you can do this with any sort of assessment that you attach a grade to. So where do we see the standards? Really anywhere you want to put them. Like I said, at the very beginning of a unit, I do give all of my students a handout with all of the learning outcomes for that unit. I then make sure that I reference every single learning outcome that is associated with anything we do in class. I am constantly referencing LO 5.1, LO 5. Like when I say LO, they know learning outcome, and they should be able to go back and see what concept that's relating to. So basically everything I do in class is labeled with a learning outcome. So that way they're able to kind of tie everything together. So here's an example of some notes that I would use in class. As you can see at the top, it has the LO number, so learning outcome 5.4, and then I actually retype the learning outcome. So I apologize if you hear my dog in the background. Um, so I do annotate the learning outcome number at the top, and then I have all the notes there. The reason I do that is so that when a student is struggling with something, or let's say they need to do a reassessment, they can go back and reference the notes that they need to use when they're trying to prepare for it. Here's a lab. This one, again, it's a little bit less detailed, but you can see at the top, it does have a learning outcome attached to it. The other nice thing with this is if a student's working on a lab and they get to the pre-lab questions, they're like, I don't know how to do this. Oh, well, what learning outcome is it? Well, it's 5.4. We'll go find your 5.4 notes. And then they instantly know where in the notes to look. So it helps kind of keep them organized and their thought process organized as well. It's also really helpful with tying in having this type of system where you're constantly referencing the standards with helping them recall previous information as well. It's just something that once we got into it, it really seemed to help the students start to tie everything together. Here's an example of practice problems that I've used. And then again, it's just titled at the top, which standard they are associated with. So if they're looking for an example, one, they know that they can go and they can look at their notes and know exactly which notes to look at to figure out how to do this, because there's going to be practice problems in there. They also can then, if they are trying to reassess, they can figure out which practice problems they need to associate with that. The idea is that they see how everything's tying together. Another thing that drove me to doing this was that I noticed a lot of students had a really hard time connecting the concepts in chemistry. And I would try to convince them, oh, everything's tied together. They didn't necessarily, not that they didn't believe me, they just weren't able to see it. And by being able to reference specific learning outcomes, they're able to see it better. So that's just another reason why I like it. So here's an assessment. This is a quiz that I would give in class. I personally like to put the learning outcome on the assessment itself, on the summative assessment itself. Some teachers might not like to do that. And maybe you would rather just give them the questions. You personally know which ones are aligned to. I did it this way just because I liked, it helped with recall for the students is sort of the way I looked at it. You know, if they see learning outcome 5.1, well, if they've been seeing that on everything we're doing, then ideally it should hopefully help with recall. So I like to break it up by the actual learning outcomes on my quizzes. What you'll notice at the bottom is it has two learning outcomes attached to that, 5.3 and 5.4, because sometimes you have to be able to do 5.3 to be able to do 5.4. So a 5.3 learning outcome is a mass-to-mass stoichiometry problem, and 5.4 is a limiting reactant problem. Well, you're not going to be able to do 5.4 if you can't do 5.3. Both of those in the same question, because you're going to use 5.3 to accomplish 5.4. I hope that makes sense. You could, in reality, combine 5.2, 5.3, but you can combine all of them if you wanted to. Maybe you want to break them up so that way they can focus on specific ones. Maybe if it's a reassessment, you give them just a couple of questions and you say, okay, this is going to cover all four of these, and you're going to have to be able to do all of these to be able to answer this question, which is also totally fine. It's sort of up to you how you want to do that. All right. So how do I actually grade this and put this into my grade book? So there was last summer a chemistry conference that I went to where there was another teacher who was describing doing essentially a hybrid model like what I'm describing. And I loved the concept. He used a 3, 2, 1 scale, and 0 was just, you just didn't do it. But he did a 3, 2, 1 scale where essentially 3 is you're doing it, 2 you're close, 1 you're not really close at all, you need a lot of help. And then 0 is you just didn't do it. And so it was a green, yellow, red system, essentially. So I took that because I wasn't really sure which scale I wanted to use. Marzano does use the 4 to 1 scale. AP uses 5 to 1 as their grading. One of the pieces of feedback I got from my students with the system was they were not huge fans of the like lack of wiggle room basically in the grades. They did want to be able to see like a B level and a C level and whatnot. So I am changing this year. It won't be a 1 through 3 scale. It'll actually be a 1 through 5 scale because I would like it to mimic the College Board and what they would see in AP. Because a lot of my honors chemistry students, they're going to take AP chemistry, hopefully either the next year or the year after, and same with dual credit. So those kids seeing a would fit them a lot. So I'm actually changing this. But this is a grading scale that I would use when I was grading their quizzes. So if you've ever seen Marzano, essentially this scale would be built into each standard. And that is where I would always get very overwhelmed with Marzano because sometimes with a chemistry concept or a chemistry standard, it's as simple as you get it or you don't. There isn't a level 4, a level 3, a level 2. Like it's just, oh, I've got it, or oh, I don't have it. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And so by having to build in the scale to every standard, it really, to me, felt very overwhelming. So rather than build it into each standard, I kind of created a generic rubric grading tool that I would use with each standard. Sometimes there isn't they either get a 1 or they get a 3, which actually now would be a 5. Like they either get it or they don't. Um, some of the best examples, one of my learning outcomes is like, can you identify what a proton is? Well, you can or you can't, right? Like you can tell me that the number of like if I give you a symbol with the number of protons, or if I give you the number of protons, can you tell me the symbol? If I give you a symbol, can you tell me the number of protons? Those are really, it's hard to level that. So that one is more of just like a pretty straightforward, you can or you can't. But something like stoichiometry very easily allows itself to do this. So that's why instead of putting it in the standard, I like to put it as its own rubric when I'm grading separately. I hope that makes sense. Um, yeah. So here's an example of an assessment that I used to give you an idea of what the levels are. So this would be a stoichiometry problem. You'll notice the very first question just asks for a mole ratio. To me, that is not meeting the standard. You are close, but you have not met the standard. So that would be like a 2.0, which is like a D level. Okay, you can find a mole ratio, that's at least a D. For 2, I give them a balanced equation and they have to do the stoichiometry. And so to me, if I give you a balanced equation and you can do the stoichiometry, because that's really what I'm trying to grade here, then that's a passing level. It's at that time would have been a 2.75. In the new version, it'd probably be like a level 3 or 4. And then for the number 3, this is the most advanced level. I don't give them a balanced equation. They have to write out their own equation. They have to balance it themselves, and then they do the stoichiometry. That's the more challenging one. That's the higher level one. So that's how I would kind of level out these questions. So if you have a traditional grade book, the hardest part is going to be figuring out the grading system. The one really nice positive thing here is that if you have a learning management system, so my school uses Canvas. So if you have Canvas, I can help you figure this out, no problem whatsoever. It's actually extremely easy to do. And it has a grading book system built in that allows you to do standards-based grading through Canvas. If you do not have Canvas, if you have Blackboard or some other LMS, I do believe most of them have a setting that you can change the gradebook in that LMS to they're called many different things. I think Learning Mastery is what it's called in Canvas, but basically it could be a mastery gradebook, or some of them are called standards-based grading. And you can actually format the gradebook in your LMS to model what you want for your standards-based grading. So the example I have here is from my actual gradebook. We have 4 learning outcomes. The gentleman that previously, or that I kind of got the idea from, what he would do is if they had the green, that means they passed it. Anything other than green means they didn't pass it. And basically the way he would figure out their grade is however many green learning outcomes they have out of however many learning outcomes they've covered, that's their percentage for, let's say, the summative category in the grade book. So student 1 at the very top has all greens, they get 100%. But student 2 only has 2 greens, so they would only have 50%. When I started doing this, the issue I had with it was that I I didn't like, so the kids that are in the orange range, they're close. I don't feel like they deserved a 0. So I actually modified this for myself, and I'm modifying it again because I think I was actually too generous, to be very honest. Um, the greens, I would assign a point of 1. Oranges, I would assign a point of points of 0.75, and reds, if the red was a 0, they got 0. If the red was a 1, for example, they would get like a 0.5. I would tally up all the points they got, and I would divide by the total number of learning outcomes we'd assessed at that point, and that's how I would get their percentage. To be very honest, I think that the orange probably shouldn't be a 0.75, at least not in an honors class. It probably should have been a 0.65. I think that that would have been a little bit more accurate representation. But I think with adding in more levels, so a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm going to be able to have more variation. So this is where, again, that hybrid model kind of comes in. I'm using standards, but I'm translating them into a percent that you would use in a traditional gradebook. If you've read Marzano at all, he does have a scale. I tried doing what he recommended. I did not understand it. It just wasn't translating well for me. And so this actually worked really, really well. The kids understood it as well. Oh, I'm passing 4 of them. I have 100%. Oh, I'm only passing 2. I need to go back and reassess or do something for those other 2 that I'm not doing well on. So I hope that made sense. So if you have a traditional grading system, so my grading system, like I said, I have categories. I have what is called the summative category, and that is where I put my quizzes, and that is a standards-based category. I have my formative, which for this year would be like the completion points I give them, right? Sometimes there's just things like it's not really standards based, but you want to give them points to help motivate. That would be just traditional. Oh, you did it, you get 5 points, maybe. And that's not a standards based class. That's not standards based. That category is just a regular old category. Labs, if you were using a standards-based system, you could translate the grade into a percentage like I just described, and then put that in the lab category, and then whatever else you might have. So again, this is why I kind of keep saying the hybrid system, because a lot of the times when you read standards-based, where it gets overwhelming is they're like, everything has to be standards-based, and I just don't know if that's possible. Maybe at some point it will be with more time, but I like using it now for my summative grades. I think it helps give the kids a better representation of what they actually know in my class. Reassessments, do I allow them? Yes. It is not a district policy. It is my policy. It's not a school policy. It's just something that I do. It's a personal philosophy. We're all human. We all make mistakes. And a lot of the times in our adult life, we're allowed to go back and try and fix those. So I don't see why I wouldn't allot that to my students. But I am not of the mindset where I'm just like, oh, okay, you just want to reassess, here you go. Like, I don't just like, oh, here, do it again. Because I realize that there are some kids who just won't take it seriously, and they're just going to take the test 10 times until they get the A they want. So there is a process put in place for how they can do it. And I'll go over that in a minute. Sometimes when you read standards-based grading stuff, there's some articles and some resources that are very heavy that you have to allow that. Again, I think that's sort of up to you. And some of you might be in a district where you have to, and so you don't have a choice. And then hopefully using a standards-based system will actually help you do it in an easier fashion. So a couple of things that I like to do is, what I've tried to tell my students all year long is that chemistry interweaves with itself constantly. And by having my learning outcomes, I can demonstrate that for them. So I always start the school year out in Unit 1, we do dimensional analysis, unit conversions. That's learning outcome 1.3. And I try to explain to them that that is just a core skill that you will learn, that you're going to use in many, many units in this class. You'll unit with, so you can see learning outcome 2.3, where they're quantifying mass, moles, and number of particles. So when they use Avogadro's number to convert between the number of particles and the moles, when they try to do a molar mass conversion, so from grams to moles, when they do stoichiometry, if we do thermostoichiometry, if you do a gas law stoichiometry, anything that involves some sort of stoichiometry involves dimensional analysis. So whenever I assess on something like that, I will include learning outcome 1.3, because if you can't do just basic dimensional analysis, the ability to set up and convert from one unit to another, you shouldn't be able to do this other learning outcome. And so I can reassess on that throughout the semester and really throughout the school year by using the learning outcomes. I do again, I know we have a short period of time, but like my grade book is set up so that whatever their most recent assessment is, that carries the most weight on their grade. So it's not that it is the last grade. It's I can't think of the word right now. Basically, all of their grades or all of the assessments count, but the most recent one holds the most weight. And I can't remember the name of it right now. It's a certain mode when you put it in the grade book. Poop. Okay, sorry. But basically, all of their assessments count, but the most recent holds the greatest weight. So if they're reassessing all year long, they're constantly getting grades put into that learning outcome, so that learning outcome is changing. Ideally, if they get it, yes, I think it is the power law. But ideally, if they get it, they should be able to keep doing it, right? But sometimes I do have learning outcomes that maybe don't tie in super duper well with other learning outcomes. There are certain things in chemistry that you're just like, here's this, now we'll never use it again. And then like atomic theory, right? Like the history of the atom. There's not really much that I'm going to be throwing that back in with. Maybe there could be, but just right now I'm not. So then those situations, I actually will create an additional reassessment for them. But there is a process to do this. It is not a simple like, oh, here you go, here's another quiz, have fun. It is, they have to sit down with me and discuss what happened. Why weren't they successful the first time around? Did they prepare? If so, how are they going to change themselves being prepared? And then I give them additional practice problems that they have to do on their own. And then they bring back in, we review together. And then if it looks like they're doing better, I will then make a reassessment for them. So there is a process that they have to go through. Luckily, a lot of times I can just reassess it on the next assessment or in the future. If I see there's one learning outcome that they all really struggled with, then I know I need to go back and reteach it. Well, when they have their next quiz, I'm just going to throw it on there anyway, because I know they all need to reassess on it. So there's some flexibility with that. Sorry. So that's it. I do think I went kind of fast, sorry. But there's a lot to it. This is just an overview. Like I said, you can do whatever works best for you. It's just kind of an idea of how to make it maybe a hybrid in your class so you can get started with it if you want. And then that way, maybe eventually it will be a fully standards-based grade class, or maybe you just keep certain areas traditional. So yeah.
So we have at least 20 minutes left. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself and feel free to ask or share what you think.
If you're interested in seeing my gradebook on Canvas, I'd be more than happy to pull up a screen and show any of you that are interested what it actually looks like in Canvas itself. Because I realize like that is one of the trickiest things is figuring out how to, if you're thinking of doing this and you aren't a standards-based district, how are you going to actually record those grades? And if you have an LMS, that makes it generally a lot easier.
I just want to share that when I started teaching, I worked for a school that, well, we use learning objectives pretty much all the time, you know, and so we learned how to break down basically all of our things into specific skills or what we were looking for. And so we're trying to clarify that in terms of working with the kids. We never really did the grading the way you're talking about, but it's the same sort of idea. I think we all, in some ways, use learning objectives and then try to tailor our activities around them, but identifying them specifically and targeting those so that, because a lot of time the kids will forget those earlier things.
Yeah.
And it's like, you really need this, and they don't real, like you say, they can't relate that to the fact that it's part of a continuum of things. So that's very good.
Well, and the other nice thing is that if I do get a kid that comes and says, I did really bad on this, I want to reassess, it's so much easier for me to say, okay, do you have your notes for learning outcome 5.4?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're right here. Okay, let's look at those. What didn't you understand? Oh, well, I didn't really understand the mole ratio. I didn't know what should go on the top and what should go on the bottom.
Yeah.
It did make for a nice, it made it a lot easier for me as a teacher, to be honest, because like I would have kids who'd be like, I don't understand. I'm like, what don't you understand? I don't know.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, I just don't get unit 2. And okay, what about unit 2? I don't know. And so by having the learning outcomes specifically written out for them, I've noticed that they come, oh, I don't understand the learning outcome 2.1 or whichever one it is. And so it does help me help them better because they don't know what they don't know.
And I'm not sure if this came up before. I came in from a different session and we were encouraged to, so I'm glad I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I find that really wastes a lot of time, no matter if you're online, hybrid, whatever, I have to switch last year between 6 different classrooms for 6 different preps, sometimes for the same class.
Mm.
So in which case, instead of actually writing out learning objectives on the board, which you're just going to erase for the next teacher in 20 minutes anyway, I would just write the number.
Mm-hmm.
So if I give them a list of all the learning outcomes at either at the beginning of each unit or literally for the whole year, and I'll just walk up, right, 1.3 is what we're looking at today. And then that way too, when they come in for what I call the drive-bys, the standards checklist with the principals checking you out, then they can actually say, hey, she's done it. And then they can say to the kids, where is this located? And they know. That does really help.
It is so nice because same thing up on my board, we're always told put a learning objective. So I just put LO and then I put the number. And if any administration asks, I'm like, well, ask to see their list. They all have the list. And the kids all know it too. It is a very convenient tool. I really do like that. Okay, so I did see that someone was asking to see the Canvas page. I would be more than happy to show you. Does anyone else use Canvas? I feel like that's a really common one. Okay, let's see, where are you, Canvas? So in Canvas, you can actually set up the learning outcomes in Canvas itself, and then you create a rubric and you can just attach that to every assignment that you put in there, and you can just go through and click it. It's actually, oh, my classes are in, sorry. We've been waiting for our classes to be populated into Canvas, and we start in a week and they just populated, so yay. That was a nice surprise. All right, let me find a class from last year. 2020 honors.
I see they made a COVID-19 sandbox. Do they know you're not supposed to share materials with this whole thing?
Yeah. So we, that was actually my doing because I was just trying to figure, like, I wanted to try things out in my sandbox, and I was like, what am I gonna title this? I'm like, no, it's COVID. And yeah. And so now we're starting remotely, and yay. All right, so if you've never seen Canvas, this is Canvas. This is my honors chemistry page. So in the outcomes tab or section, I actually have all of my learning outcomes written out. And so again, this is Canvas specific, so I don't know about other learning management systems, but you can actually put the rubric itself into the learning outcomes. So I showed that rubric in the slides. I will be changing this. Again, I'm going to make the scale of 5 to 1, or I guess 5 to 0. And then you can put in descriptions and all of that great stuff. And then I have, there we go, decaying average, the decaying average method. You can change the method depending on what the learning outcome is. I think you can take like the most recent. I think you can take the highest, whatever works for you or however you want to do it. And then you can actually, in Canvas, you can adjust what percentage. So like mine is 70-30. Most recent score holds a 70% value. Everything else is 30. You can make it less, more, it's up to you. So there are all my learning outcomes. So then what I would do is I gave paper quizzes. I didn't give, well, that's changing this year, obviously. But back then I gave paper quizzes, but you can still grade it in Canvas. So you would just go to quizzes. Nope, I'm lying. Unless they're gone. Nope, there they are. Okay, so I would go into assignments, and all I would do is I would type up, so here's an example, Unit 4, Quiz 2. In it, I would simply put this assessment covered whichever learning outcomes, and then I would actually have those learning outcomes attached as a rubric. And so I would grade them by hand on paper, and then after I grade them, I would go into SpeedGrader. And when I would go into SpeedGrader, you can see that the rubric is over here. There's no assignment that they submitted. So, but this is still present. So you'll actually be able to see the rubric, and you can, I think there's a test student. So like you would just go view rubric, and then you just click what the student got. Oh, they got a, well, I don't know if this is gonna work right now because it's a past class, but normally you can just click on whatever they received on the quiz, and then it populates. It's super easy, like this is very quick and easy to do. And once you've done that, what will happen is then you would go to the grade book. And this is the traditional grade book that would almost always pop up. But then you select Learning Mastery. And now you're going to see a standards-based grading grade book.
Oh, wow.
And so these grades include every single assessment related to that learning outcome. That's why you can see some of them have like a 2.85, a 1.45, 2.95. So any assessment that has that learning outcome attached to it will automatically be populated into this grade book. And then the hard part is I do manually then have to go through and calculate out the percentage for each student, but that actually goes pretty quickly once you get used to it, because you just know how many learning outcomes they've assessed total, and then you just kind of add up the points. It works. It worked really well. I wish there was a better system. Actually, I think my school is now using PowerSchool, so supposedly Canvas and PowerSchool will talk to each other, and so I shouldn't have to do it manually, but we'll see. But that's how I would do it. And it worked. I mean, it worked really, really well. It was a really nice, easy way to do it. And like I said, you just copy and paste your learning outcomes or standards into that outcome tab.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
For those of us that don't have access to this, but do use Google Docs, one thing that you may or may not be aware of is something called Gubrick. And it's a secondary program with it called Doctopus. And what that does is you create a rubric in like a Google Sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And then you upload an assignment. It could be either from emails or from a Google Classroom. And then attach the rubric to it. So when you open each child's assignment, the rubric's across the top, and you can just click, click, click. As soon as you hit submit, then it saves it onto a secondary spreadsheet.
Oh, okay. So
It takes a little bit of time to set it up, but for things like labs or like digital posters or things like that, I find that really helps. And if you want to, you can also, instead of, well, okay, so the rubric will print itself and timestamp it onto the doc. Or if it's like a PDF, what you can do is you can email the rubric to the student. So then they can actually see where everything is. And you can type in half points. It doesn't show up very well, but you can still give partial.
that's good. Oh, see, I've never used that before. There's so much stuff out there now that I feel like it makes it a lot easier. I know with Canvas that you can also type in a grade. So like if a kid got like a 2.5 or a 2.75, you can put that in there. The other thing is I did share, like I said, my rubric was just a generic, like 1 to 3, but like a 1 to 5 scale that you would use on every single learning standard that, and so I just had a copy of that rubric for them. Like, if you're ever wondering what a 5 means, here's what this means. So it sounds similar to like what that is. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to try PowerSchool. I'm hopeful that it'll be good, but yeah. Moving to new technology right before all of this was not my ideal, but that's okay. Gotta be flexible.
Any more questions? There was a question about sharing some files, and I believe those will be taken care of. So you were trying to, Asia, you were trying to access the PowerPoint?
Yes, and it says that right now you have to request access to the PowerPoint in the shared file.
Okay. Did you do that? Oh,
I didn't.
You did it by writing in the chat. Okay. All right.
And I don't think I have
request
access.
that to whoever owns the PowerPoint.
Yes.
By the way, if any of you were interested in seeing my standards, even just to help kind of create your own, you're more than welcome to email me and I'd be happy to share them with you. That's fine. And like I said, mine are probably changing still. Not probably, they will be changing as I continue this process. But for right now, they are what I'll be using. But you're more than welcome. This is my email. I think it's on the screen, and yes, I would be happy to share that with you.
Tressa.
Yeah.
I know, you guys are going straight digital. You can use Go Formative, the executive one, and it has the calculator in it. So you literally can do the calculations, dimensional analysis right on it. It's really great.
Oh, that is nice to know.
And it will grade it for you once you put the key in. The problem I have is my school won't give me the pro edition with
Ah.
for the math. So I'm going to pay for that. I've already gotten the okay from my department head because I need the math.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you can also tier it.
Okay.
So one of the people with the last PD I did, RISD, or RISD or whatever it is, he had me go in by colors. You have different groups of students by colors, and it would send them to a different test. Where the third tier, you could have less test items. You might have them fill in blanks in a dimensional analysis problem, word banks, everything included to address the needs for 504s and IEPs.
That's really good to know. Yeah, thank you. So I'm the department chair for my school. I'm trying to find as much technology as I can for all of the teachers and just be like, here's all the things. Find something that works because.
There was a gentleman from Barrington, and talk about technology. He's the king of technology. He has his Go Formative, the grades and everything hooked into a spreadsheet. Like, it just kills me. He has hyperdocs, everything's in the spreadsheet for the whole year. I don't know how he has time for anything.
Jeez,
Oh my God.
I know.
Math department used School Formative during our shutdown time. And they highly, highly recommend it. I started to try to use it. I happen to be in an organic chemistry section of my grade 10. And so it was helpful for them to try and draw, but I found that we were so late in the game, it was hard for me to get them to utilize it the same way that math could. But they also highly, highly recommend it.
Yeah, but that's the full version to get the calculator.
It was
Huh?
not.
It's not?
It was not until pretty much the week before we closed for the year.
Oh, God.
That's when our particular powers that be pulled the finger out of a particular area and actually clicked the button that said yes.
Okay.
It's an asset. Really.
Oh dear. Well, thank you so much, Tressa, and good luck. That I think we're all kind of in the same boat. People with different degrees of feeling comfortable with various bits of technology, and we all learn something from each other. But definitely a little scariness there, but we'll be okay. I know we always are. We always are, and I will request the privacy settings be changed if they're not done already. We have somebody who monitors all the chat and should be able to fix those things. But anyway, so if you'd like to stay and talk, you may do that, or if you'd like to, just take a little rest. I didn't realize how tiring things got. My eyes are not focusing anymore for some reason. I've been here all morning. So it's a good experience, actually. It's like, what? I can't see. Let me take my glasses off. Maybe I can see a little better.
I'll apologize that it's so dark for me. I'm in Tokyo. It's 4 a.m.
Oh my gosh. Oh
So
my gosh.
when I look tired, that's why I'm laying down.
Oh my gosh. God bless you. Do you teach in Tokyo?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you in school already, or did you?
We start teachers back the 20th, kids back the 27th, and they're having us go full 100% face-to-face with 3 foot or less social distancing.
Okay. Well, you have
Yes.
a better situation, I believe, we have here. I mean, right? So there's hope for us.
One thing that bothers me, though, is it takes me an hour and a half to get to school on public transport. I don't have the option to drive.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Students. So in which case, it's about half of the population will be on crowded trains. That's one thing that we have to deal with.
Do they have a mask mandate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Okay.
How long have you been there?
13 years.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
You've been there as long as my son. My son's in Nagoya.
Oh, beautiful. Nagoya's lovely. Have you been to visit?
No, I don't like flying over water. He's not far from the Isiwan Bay, the bay.
Yeah.
And I have 2 Japicans, Japanese American children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're adorable. But he assured me it's very cultural to be wearing a mask in Japan.
Yes. You'd see it on a normal basis anyway. I got worried about how are we going to do labs with kids wearing masks when they constantly touch their face. And then I realized, why am I worried? They do this on a normal allergy season basis anyway. I just never noticed.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
Wow. Well, good luck to everybody. And
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be working hard, but making some progress. But anyway, thank you so much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I like to stick with you, Kathy.
What? You want to stay?
Thank
I'm
you.
your shadow.
I know. Why don't you leave me alone, Elena? You go wherever I go.
Hey, that's a good thing. That means just maybe I like you.
Well, I know that already. You know.
Yeah.
Oh,
You are a good chicklet.
oh, gee, you too. You too. Well, anyway, all right. I got to rest. I'm going to end.